fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to.
Who are shouting? Just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planting information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over a cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was still
already
in
done.
Parliament,
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the major's. The major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show, but if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, one of the 4 principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbunda women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Thursday. You've got Clayton Morris here. Natali is off tonight. Good to see all of you guys. David and Philip are here. Grim is running things back there as well. There's David. Good to see all of you guys. Hey, we've got a very busy show. Are you buckled up? Are you buckled up, Papa Smurf? Last night, David looked blue, so we were calling him Papa Smurf. Yeah, we got a very busy show for you. There's a lot of big news that's been happening over the past few hours that we're going to bring to you. In fact, we've got this Robert Kennedy hearing on censorship. He was one of the people testifying in this hearing, which just got incredibly heated and crazy. We're going to show you all the ins and outs of that. Really stunning moments inside the halls of Congress, trying to censor him at a censorship hearing. Like, what kind of weird world are we living in? What kind of a clown show are we living in?
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah, we're going to censor you. We're going to hold this hearing, and we're going to censor you so you can't testify at a censorship hearing. Also, NATO just destroyed the U.S. Constitution. We're now basically ceding power to unelected globalists once again in the halls of Congress. So a lot of congressional news today. We're going to talk about the devaluation of the U.S. dollar and why this big move by the BRICS nations could change everything. We're going to tell you what country is now wanting to move away from the U.S. dollar towards the ruble to settle transactions. We've got breaking news out of Iraq. We've got Disney going into full panic mode. Disney collapsing left and right based on their movie releases. No one going to their parks. What's happening? Is the woke agenda? We've got so much more to talk about as Redacted starts right now. Hope everyone's doing well on this Thursday. It's hard to believe it's already Thursday. It's been a crazy first week back from my little.
Yeah, no, I woke up thinking it was Wednesday. So it was Wednesday almost all day for me until you just said that.
I guess it's a good feeling, right? I mean, certainly when I was in school and I was like back in the day, I was like, man, get to Friday. But now I love doing this show. So I don't really think about it in those ways as I used to when I was a kid, wanting to make sure that school was done and I could just enjoy my weekend. So anyway, good to see all of you guys here. We've got a lot of news to get to here, so we will avoid all the chit chat. But I do want to mention we do have a daily newsletter. I would love for all of you to pick up and subscribe because it's totally free and the kids call it the best newsletter around. I had one of our viewers wrote to me this morning and said, thank you guys for the newsletter. It's the perfect way to start my day. And that just meant the world to us because that's what we wanted to do. It's very easy to go to redacted.inc, not .com, and then click there to put in your email address. Then you'll have to verify that email address. You'll receive it in your inbox and just verify it. And then on Monday morning, because that's when the next newsletter will go out, you'll get the newsletter first thing in the morning, about 7 a.m. Eastern time. You can read it over your cup of coffee to kick off your day. And we try to cover the stories that the mainstream media, propagandizes, sends you the propaganda version of it. We send you the real story so you can start off your day and be more informed. Natali writes it. I add some color and commentary and a lot of little quips and stuff in there. So anyway, it's a perfect way to start your day. Go to redacted.inc to sign up for the newsletter, and we hope it brings a lot of value to you and your family. All right, well, let's get to a bunch of big stories today. So let me ask you a question. What is the most important document in the United States of America? If you could name one document, let me know in the chat room. If you could name one document, what would it be? What is the most important document in the United States of America? If your answer is the U.S. Constitution, unfortunately, you're no longer correct. Sorry, you're no longer correct. The U.S. Constitution has now been pushed aside in favor of another document, the North Atlantic Treaty. That's right, the document that rules NATO, the governing body of the globalist expansion of war around the world. That's what the document supports. In a stunning move that got zero attention in the mainstream media, I didn't see any of the mainstream media covering this story at all. None of the major papers, the major news networks, nobody. So, stunning move that the United States Senate voted down an amendment, a simple amendment, to the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, the defense budget. Simple amendment. What was that amendment? Here's how Senator Rand Paul, who proposed the amendment, described it. Here's his tweet. Today, I offered an amendment to the Defense Authorization Act that would have clarified Article 5 of the NATO treaty does not supersede the Constitution, meaning the Constitution is more important than a NATO treaty. That's all it would do. It would just clarify to make sure that we all understand where the Constitution sits in this pecking order. Here it is from Senator Rand Paul. Here's the actual amendment itself, which is stunned to have given the U.S. sovereignty away to NATO. Here it is. It is the sense of Congress that the Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty does not supersede the constitutional requirement that Congress declare war before the United States engages in war. That's it. Very simple. Congress has the power, not NATO, to decide what happens to the United States when we're declaring war or not declaring war. Simple. In the middle of the floor debate, Senator Mike Lee stepped outside to post this message to social media because he couldn't believe what was happening. He was witnessing all of these people voting against this amendment. Members of the Senate voting against, and members of his own Republican Party voting against it. He voted for it. But here's what he had to say in the middle of this voting. Watch.
Okay, so something really weird and quite concerning just happened. We're debating the National Defense Authorization Act, a bill that goes through Congress every year where we talk about defense priorities. My friend and colleague, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, introduced an amendment number 222 to this act. And it's a simple amendment. It's just one sentence. It says, it is the sense of Congress that Article 5 of the NATO treaty does not supersede the constitutional requirement that the Congress declare war before the United States engages in war. Look, the Constitution requires this already, so it's a no-brainer. And most of my colleagues voted against it. Last I checked, there were 0 Democrats and only 16 Republicans who voted for it. So this really did surprise me because the Constitution makes very clear in Article 1, Section 8, that in order to declare war, you've got to have a declaration of war from Congress. The president can't do that on his own. And we certainly don't want a treaty deciding that for us and taking us to war. Now, the reason he references Article 5 of the NATO treaty is that that does contain an expectation that we'll defend the sovereignty of other nation states. But there's nothing in there that supersedes our constitutional responsibility to get Congress to authorize that. And there's not even anything in there that overtly requires us to go to war. We often assume that it may get to that, and in some cases it will. But I think it's very, very dangerous to have a situation where you could go to war solely by virtue of a treaty provision that itself doesn't require you to go to war, much less supersede our own Constitution. Something to think about, and disappointing, but I have a feeling we'll be having this discussion again.
So 16 people voted for it. You could Ted Cruz was one of them. Mike Lee was one of them. Of course, Rand Paul and a few others, but not many at all. And it should, and as Rand Paul then tweeted, it should have been an easy vote to affirm the Constitution. To vote against affirming the Constitution actually places doubt in the Constitution, but it was defeated 83-16. He tweeted. This also comes on a day when, or literally a debate on, well, how much more money are we going to send to Ukraine? And now the Washington Post is reporting that Ukraine has received those cluster bombs that we sent them. And NATO is already helping them launch attacks against Russia. Cluster bombs, of course, are indiscriminate and widely condemned by the international community. They have a great potential to kill civilians and for many years to come because these little balls are out there and these kids are just going, they pick them up and boom, years later. So why are we sending cluster bombs? Who authorized that? Who's allowing that to happen? And this idea that we can continue to send billions of dollars billions of dollars when we at home have no ammunition anymore. So just a short time ago, Senator Rand Paul was on Fox Business. He was asked about, this amendment, but also how much more funding can we send to Ukraine? Watch.
I think economically, or from a fiscal conservative perspective, it makes no sense to borrow money from China to send it to Ukraine. So it's not like we're sending them surplus funds. It's like, oh, we have some surplus ammo around. We're actually out of ammo now. We're out of money. And so there's no real sense in continuing to do this. The other thing it does is it prolongs the war. This war can go on forever. I don't think the Russians are ever leaving Crimea. I don't think the Ukrainians have the might to push them out. So if the end point is Russia has to leave Crimea and all the other parts that they occupy of Ukraine, then the war goes on, and it'll be a war of attrition over many, many years. And the Ukrainian people are suffering horribly, the land, the industry, the economic base. So I don't want the war to go on forever. I think there needs to be a discussion, and I think we could facilitate that. But just promising unlimited weapons, including cluster bombs, I really think that it's a mistake, and it will make war more difficult, peace more difficult to achieve.
Peace more difficult to achieve because we continue to send them weapons. Now we're sending them cluster bombs. Like, what's next? What's next? Because as Putin said this weekend, these attacks using cluster bombs is a line in the sand they will not abide. And now you're seeing these massive attacks in Odessa. What do they want to happen to Ukraine? Is it the total utter destruction of Ukraine? Is that the goal? Because they're getting it. And NATO is helping them do it very, very quickly. More drama in Congress today. At a hearing on censorship, this is unbelievable. Debbie Wasserman Schultz tried to censor Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You can't make this up. A hearing on censorship. Wasserman Schultz, whose hair always looks wet, can't get over that, tried to keep him from testifying at the beginning of this hearing, tried to pass a motion that would get him censored from testifying at a censorship hearing. That didn't pass. They had enough people on the roll call vote to say, no, we're going to go forward with this testimony. Sorry, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, you're not going to allow this to happen. We will, in fact, hear from Mr. Kennedy. So that failed, but she didn't give up. That was just the first bit of drama. Watch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we respectfully requested that you rescind Mr. Kennedy's invitation to appear here due to his repeated and very recent statements that spread dangerous anti-Semitic and anti-Asian conspiracy theories and attempted to move into executive session because House rules prohibit public testimony that degrades or defames people. You floated a baseless conspiracy theory that the coronavirus was bioengineered to target Caucasians and black people, but to spare Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people. Mr. Kennedy, your bizarre, unproven claim echoes that same historic slander of labeling Jews and Chinese people as a race, and that Jews, and in this case Chinese people, somehow managed to avoid a deadly illness that targets other groups for death. You do see that, yes or no?
You're misstating.
No. I quoted what you said earlier, and it is directly what you said. So just ask me yes or no.
I was describing an NIH-funded study.
No, you didn't cite any.
I was describing an NIH-funded study by Cleveland Clinic scientists.
Reclaiming my time. You did not reference. Reclaiming my time.
Published in USC Medical, which is one.
The time is mine. I'm reclaiming it. Please ask the witness to stop talking.
You asked me a question.
Reclaiming.
Allow me to answer my question.
Sorry, we're not gonna let you answer your question. So just to be clear, Kennedy is saying that he was citing a study which shows susceptibility of certain races to COVID-19. Wasserman Schultz is saying, no, you're making that up. You did not. And then and then Congressman Massey had to just drop the hammer. He's like, wait a second. Here are the government-funded studies and the Pfizer study that Mr. Kennedy was referring to. Watch this moment.
You did not cite any study like you are citing here now during that conversation. You referenced no study at all. You simply labeled Jews and Chinese people as a race, and you also said that somehow they managed to avoid a deadly illness that targets other groups for death. You don't see that? You're trying to rewrite history here.
Mr. Chairman, I have unanimous consent request.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for UC.
I ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record a study that Mr. Kennedy just referenced, new insights into genetic susceptibility of COVID-19. The main body said that they investigated genetic susceptibility to COVID-19 by examining DNA polymorphism in ACE2 and TMPRSS2. Those are receptors for COVID in 81,000 human genomes, and they found unique genetic susceptibility across different populations. I have another document that I'd like to ask unanimous consent.
Without objection.
To submit, and this is from the FDA review of efficacy and safety of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. This is dated December 10th, 2020, and it shows that the Pfizer trial and the USDA broke down the effectiveness of the vaccine into 7 different racial categories, because this was also a concern of theirs, and it would frankly be delinquent not to study the effects across the different
But Mr. Kennedy.
Bam. Oh, I love that. I love when just people bring facts, like the hyperbole. She's like, you lie and you spread conspiracy theories, Mr. Kennedy, about race. You're making it up.
Well, and the point, in the minute he starts to get to where he's going to make sense and clear it up, no, I'm reclaiming my time. I don't want to hear it. You're going to say something and make me look bad. Shut up.
Yeah, I'm going to censor you so you can't respond. I'm reclaiming my time. I'm going to make a statement, not allow you to respond and explain yourself, because we live in an era where you can't have any kind of a nuanced conversation at all. He's like, no, let me explain. I was citing an NIH study, a government-funded study. No, you were not. Congressman Massey is like, can I introduce these studies that he was referring to into the public record? As part of this testimony, the CDC and Pfizer documents that corroborate Mr. Kennedy's statements around COVID and race, they're entered into the record. So after that drama, it was allowed to move forward, but not before Jeffrey Epstein, let me say it again, not before the Jeffrey Epstein funded Democrat, Stacey Plaskett, tried to derail it again. She, by the way, also tried to have journalist Matt Taibbi jailed for his journalism. She, of course, gave Epstein a $100 million tax break after he was a registered sex offender and took campaign donations. So she's that kind of person. She tried to derail this testimony once again, trying to jump in and trying to say that he should be censored and not be allowed to speak for any length of time. Listen.
Excuse me, point of order. I know that witnesses usually have 5 minutes. I see 10 minutes on the board. Is it going to be 10 minutes?
We'll give him 5 minutes, but we're pretty lax with this. We'll let him go for.
We are?
I've
seen you gavel down on quite a number of witnesses.
We've given senators and former Democrat members of Congress and all kinds
He's
of folks.
neither. He's neither.
I'm just saying in past history.
Okay.
But
Let's just watch the time for all the witnesses.
And if you want to cut him off and censor him some more, you're welcome to do it.
Oh, that's not my job. That's your job. Why don't you threaten a witness so that they can not want to be a witness?
Mr. Kennedy is recognized for his opening statement. We'll give him 5 minutes, more or less, and then we'll move to the next one. Mr. Kennedy, go right ahead.
So the continued trying to censor him at a censorship trial. Or a censorship hearing. Unbelievable. Like, this is what we've come to in this country, where we cannot, if we disagree with you, we cannot listen to you. We cannot hear you. You cannot speak. You will be deplatformed. You will be blocked, banned, taken offline. Then if that wasn't enough, she tried to level a whole pile of bullshit against Kennedy, and watch his response to that.
You tried to associate me a moment ago with the replacement theory, which is racist.
No, I did not say you had the
belongs to the gentleman
theory. I said my colleagues.
The time belongs to the gentleman from.
I denounce that theory. It is racist, and I have never endorsed it or had any association with it. Our film on a medical... By the
medical
way,
apartheid?
Bill Buxton, who is the black CDC official who ultimately exposed the Tuskegee experiment, tried for years and years to appeal to CDC to stop it for 40 years. Finally, he got relief by walking into my uncle's office in the building next door. Teddy held hearings and ended the experiment. I remember that very well. And to say that I created a film that encourages blacks not to get adequate medical care is just completely abhorrent.
Don't misuse my
It's
words,
the
sir.
witness's time. Do not censor the witness.
I'm not censoring the witness. I'm not censoring the witness. He's still talking.
It's my time, and I've given it to the witness. Do not censor him.
I'm not censoring him.
If the views that you and others have applied to me, I've attributed to me, if they were actually true, I can see why I shouldn't be able to testify here today. Those are not true. These are defamations and malignancies that are used to censor me, to prevent people from listening to the actual things that I'm saying. And I think, ranking member, that we should have a real conversation rather than an exchange of ad hominem attacks.
Yeah. So finally, then they did let Kennedy speak and allowed him to actually give his statement. And he had prepared remarks written down. Like, he was coming in here with his prepared remarks that he had written out and was ready to speak for 5 to 10 minutes. And then he just threw them out. He's like, no, I'm going to go a whole different route. And this is what I want to talk about. The very censorship that you're trying to foist on top of me right now at a censorship hearing. Watch.
That is why the First Amendment's important. Debate, congenial, respectful debate is the fertilizer, it's the water, it's the sunlight for our democracy. We need to be talking to each other. Now, this is a letter that many of you signed, many of my fellow Democrats. I've spent my life in this party. I've devoted my life to the values of this party. There's 102 people signed this. This itself is evidence of the problem that this hearing was convened to address. This is an attempt to censor a censorship hearing. The charges in this, and by the way, censorship is antithetical to our party. It was appalling to my father, to my uncle, to FDR, to Harry Truman, to Thomas Jefferson, as the chairman referred to. It is the basis for democracy. It sets us apart from all of the previous forms of government. We need to be able to talk, and the First Amendment was not written for easy speech. It was written for the speech that nobody likes you for.
Yeah. And I see a lot of people in the chat. I'm just curious what you guys think about this, because a lot of people saying, yeah, this is not that party anymore. You know, this is not an anti-war Democratic Party. This is not your uncle's party anymore. Not at all. It's a totally different Democratic Party. I don't know what it is. I don't even know why you'd want to identify as a Democrat to run on that ticket. The only thing you could hope to do is maybe to take it over and completely gut the damn thing. But good luck with that. You see who's running the Democratic Party. You know who's at the front of it right now. So Kennedy had really laid this out here at the end, and I thought this was a good way for him to lay out the second part of his speech here. And I just want to play this. And I thought it was really, really good. Listen.
I was censored not just by the Democratic administration. I was censored by the Trump administration. I was the first person censored by as the chairman pointed out, by the Biden administration 2 days after it came into office. It ordered a truthful, and by the way, they had to invent a new word called malinformation to censor people like me. There was no misinformation on my Instagram account. Everything I put on that account was cited and sourced to peer-reviewed publications or government databases. Nobody has ever pointed to a single piece of misinformation that I publish. I was removed for something they called malinformation. Malinformation is information that is true, but is inconvenient to the government, that they don't want people to hear. And that's antithetical to the values of our country. After I announced my presidency, it became more difficult for people to censor me outright. So now I'm subject to this new form of censorship, which is called targeted propaganda, where people apply pejoratives like anti-vax. I've never been anti-vaccine, but everybody in this room probably believes that I have been, because that's the prevailing narrative. Anti-Semitism, racism, these are the most appalling, disgusting pejoratives, and they're applied to me to silence me because people don't want me to have that conversation about the war, about groceries, about inflation, about the war on the middle class in this country that we need to be having.
Yeah, it's too inconvenient, isn't it? And so I was asked during an interview earlier today whether I thought he stood a chance of becoming president. And I don't know. I don't believe that the deep state will allow him to become president. I mean, look, and the media machine. When I say the deep state, I mean the absolute entrenched permanent government in Washington, D.C.
Well,
I don't see it happening.
You have too many fail-safes in place by the establishment. He'll never get past the DNC. He will never be accepted by the DNC to even get the nomination to go to be president.
Right. Right. And so then what happens? He becomes a third-party candidate, and they absolutely do not want that to happen because it would be, I'm going to call it a reverse Perot.
Well, and look what they do, too.
Wouldn't even be a reverse Perot because, well, you know, a reverse, well, because Perot, I mean, here, if you think about it, the reason Bill Clinton won is because of Perot. And beat George H.W. Bush. It's arguable, I mean, the numbers, I think, bear that out, that Bill Clinton would not have won had Ross Perot not split the vote and siphoned votes away from George H.W. Bush. So in this way, if he runs as a third-party candidate, there's no way, well, who knows, the deep state, but there's no way Biden wins if he then becomes a third-party candidate. I just don't see it happening.
Well, but the thing is, like, think about this. What happens is the debate company is private as well. So what they did in order to keep like the Green Party, like Ralph Nader, this happened to him. He was kicked off the debate stage. They said, okay, now if you're not polling at this percentage, you can't be in the debates. And then when some third parties got to that percentage, they're like, oh, wait, we raised the percentage. So that's all private and they can do whatever they want. So if he is not polling at a certain percentage, they'll say, oh, he can't be on the debate stage and nobody's going to get to hear from him. So nobody will know that he's actually running.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you remember what happened, you know, we know what happened to Bernie Sanders, but I'm just talking, forget what your politics are about Bernie Sanders. Remember when he was running and winning and doing very well against Biden and beating Kamala Harris in the polls, MSNBC, a whistleblower at MSNBC came forward, a producer, and was told the world that MSNBC was told not to put Bernie Sanders on their air because they wanted Biden. And when they put graphics up on the screen, they pretended like Andrew Yang, they pretended like Bernie Sanders weren't even candidates. On the screen instead was Kamala Harris, whose numbers were lower than theirs, and yet they didn't even put them on the screen as candidates that were running for office. That's how corrupt the mainstream media is.
My favorite was there was one graphic. Man, I wish I could find it, but where it showed the percentages. I think it was after the Iowa straw poll or whatever, and like where Bernie had got some like 30% or something like that. But they basically put the percentages of Biden and Harris as like these really big graphics with their numbers, and then this tiny itty bitty Bernie Sanders graphic with the higher number was over to the side, just to make it look like, you know, visually like he had got less, even though the number was higher.
Yeah, so, this little way over in the corner. And it was a proportional thing too, wasn't it? It was like the scaling of it was like the size.
Yeah,
of the font.
Everybody else's picture was big, and their 15% was huge, and the Kamala's like 12% was huge, and then Bernie Sanders had this tiny little picture and a tiny little graphic with his number, which was the 31%. It was itty bitty.
This is the corruption. So I'll ask you guys in the chat, like, let me know in the comments here on Rumble and on YouTube and Twitter. What do you guys think? I mean, do you think that they will allow? First of all, will they allow Trump to run? I mean, we see what's happening there. Will they allow a pro-peace, anti-war candidate to run and win on the Democratic side? I mean, you see what's happening. You literally had the leaders of the Democratic Party today at this hearing in the House trying to censor the son of former Attorney General of the United States of America who was assassinated in the House of Representatives. Just think about that for a minute.
Well, think about this. Bernie Sanders isn't even anti-war, and he couldn't win. So, like,
right.
He's more like pro-worker, right? So they don't want you to be pro-worker or anti-war. So if you're any of those things, and Kennedy's both, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, who knows? But anyway, let me know in the comments below what you guys think about this. It was amazing to watch this hearing today. There were a lot of other great moments from this hearing. I couldn't play them all, but it was worth watching today if you get a chance to watch the whole thing. It's amazing to hear from some of the testimony of the other people, the journalists who were also censored at this, who were there and were testifying at this hearing. It was pretty amazing. But I liked how he wrapped it up when finally asked at the very end, Mr. Kennedy, how do you feel about censorship? What is it? What does that say about a democracy? And he said, if you are the ones, we've never in history had people who were censoring other people who were not wanting to control you. It leads to totalitarianism. It's in keeping with totalitarianism. George Orwell warned us about this. Aldous Huxley warned us about this. That's exactly what this is. And so when the Democrats are trying to do that, that should be a wake-up call for all of us. We've got more news to get to here on your Thursday. We're going to look at the U.S. dollar devaluation in just a moment and how one major country is wanting to join the BRICS nations on settling their transactions in rubles rather than U.S. dollars. The list of BRICS countries is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the people that want to join the BRICS countries is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're moving more towards a digital CBDC. So we're moving towards a digital currency in the United States. That way they can print as much money as they want artificially and permanently devalue the U.S. dollar. So we're going to look at that. We're also going to look at Disney and what the heck happened to this company. Holy smokes. Do you guys see the Seven Dwarfs stuff? Oh, my God. And they had a big meeting yesterday. They had an off-site meeting. Disney's freaking out about it. They're in panic mode, and we're going to go over all of that. But first, look, you did the tough thing during COVID. You paid your workers, you paid your people, you pulled your business through the pandemic, and now doing the tough thing could qualify you for up to $26,000 per employee at covidtaxrelief.org. Government funds are available to reward companies with 2 or more employees who stayed open during COVID. Yes, who in many ways defied what they were being told to do. This is not a loan, and you don't have to pay it back. The program is complicated, but nobody knows more about it than the CPAs and tax experts at covidtaxrelief.org. You pay nothing up front. They do all the work and share a percentage of the cash that they get you. Businesses of all types, including nonprofits and churches, can qualify. And and also, if you had an increase in sales during that time too, you're the patriot. You're the patriots who stayed open and really did the tough thing. For your employees specifically. Let covidtaxrelief.org help you get up to $26,000 per employee. Visit covidtaxrelief.org. That's covidtaxrelief.org, covidtaxrelief.org. Well, the U.S. dollar continues its downward trajectory, artificially held up right now by all of this fake money. So there are people out there like, the dollar is fine, while the underlying fundamentals are absolutely collapsing. Just look at Italy over the past few days, announcing its intention to want to join and settle transactions using the Russian ruble in the BRICS nations, wanting to move away from the U.S. dollar. They now are added to a list of other countries who are trying to move away quickly from the U.S. dollar to settle transactions. They see the writing on the wall. For all of this and more, we wanted to bring in the CEO of Lear Capital, Kevin Demerit, who follows this very, very closely, obviously knee-deep in the precious metal space, seeing what's happening with gold and silver and watching this destruction of the U.S. dollar. Kevin, great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on, Clayton.
So I want to talk about this expansion of BRICS first, because I think there's this total cognitive dissonance in the United States. Really, the mainstream media is ignoring this story. But here you have major U.S. allies in Europe now saying, U.S. dollar, the time has come and gone. What do you say about this?
Well, I think they're right. A lot of these countries are saying that the U.S. government has weaponized the U.S. dollar against Russia and, with war and political reasons. And they don't want to be stuck in the same situation. They're looking for something that has value, that isn't getting printed left, right, and center. And this BRICS currency has a lot of implications that could absolutely crush the dollar. And I'm going to say one thing. If this happens, it will be the biggest wealth transfer from nation to another nation I think we've ever seen in the history of the world.
Wow. And how do you mean in terms of my moving away from, well, I've heard it in terms of oil transactions, right? So if we take away the amount of oil settled in US dollars, it is an absolute kneecapping of the US economy. And where the wealth then flows is, of course, into Asia, it's into Russia, it's into the Middle East, and away from the US dollar. Is that how you see it transferring?
No, when I first got into this business, I was in international banking. So trade is a big part of how a currency gets valued. So think about this for a second. The BRICS countries want to back this currency, the BRICS currency, by gold, some portion of gold. So let's just say for a second that we're going to trade with the United States and these other countries with just gold. To make a point here, we're just going to use gold. The United States last year had a $960 billion trade deficit. So if we were using gold, we would be $1 trillion less gold in the United States and $1 trillion worth of gold in those other countries, which is exactly what's going to happen if you use this BRICS currency. It's backed by gold. I need to buy the BRICS currency. I need to then give more of the BRICS currency, which is backed by gold, to those countries. They've accumulated gold, and we've lost basically $1 trillion worth of gold. That wealth transfer is the greatest, scheme that these nations could have ever thought of. And think about it, Russia, China, and India, they absolutely love gold. They would love to be able to transfer and use this as an economic unit of transfer because they're just accumulating the gold and we're losing ours. Brilliant idea, and it crushes the US dollar. Now think about this for a second. It's backed by gold, meaning that if I issue more of that currency, I've got to back more of it by more gold, which pushes the gold price up, which pushes that currency up, and our paper dollar is going to look like crap, and the whole value just absolutely goes away. We will get repatriated back trillions of dollars of U.S. currency back to the United States, and inflation will go through the roof.
Wow.
It's absolutely brilliant.
I hadn't thought of it in those terms before, and you're right. The repatriation. So as China wants to get rid of the greenbacks, saying here we are, we're turning in these U.S. Treasury bonds, we're getting rid of this. All of these countries are getting rid of it, and it's coming back to the United States. And we're sitting there saying, well, this currency is not backed by gold; it's backed by debt. The United States, what is it backed by in the United States? And so now we're sitting on all of this fake paper money, all of this artificially created cash in the United States that's not backed by gold. And then in many ways it becomes worthless. What will it be backed by in the United States? I mean, am I missing something?
No, this ploy by the BRICS countries is absolutely fantastic. We're going to take your gold, we're going to take something of value, and we're going to send you toys and cars and everything that depreciates, and we're going to grab all the real wealth, right? The tangible asset, we're going to grab that wealth. But if you take it one step further, I believe that the U.S. government sees this coming, and we better get to a digital currency where we can start manipulating values much easier than we can with the paper side of it. So I think this is just one step closer to, hey, we need to be able to do something with this worthless currency. Let's take away a zero. I mean, countries around the world have done it for years and years and years. So if it gets too bad, a digital currency would be a way to do it easy, where paper, not so much.
No, that's brilliant, and that's what we're moving to. And guys, watching this right now, what Kevin is saying is absolutely spot on. So the reason the Fed is moving towards a digital bank central currency, and they've been doing this slowly. We just heard the details here about how this is going to be rolled out from the banking sector, right? And it was a slow roll. They've been planning this since 2015, right? We're going to shift over to the central bank digital currency. Everything will be digital. We'll provide perhaps a universal basic income, but we will track everything you do. It will be Fed backed. It will not be from the banks. It'll be Fed backed, an unelected group that's going to be providing you with money. It'll be artificial. It'll be digital. It will not be tied to gold. We can print it as much as we want. We can create as many zeros as we want because it's all fake and it's all controlled by the Fed. And that's exactly what we're moving towards.
That's right. It's the perfect thing to do if you believe that the US dollar is going to take a hit by, these countries that want to back, this by gold. And here's what I look for, Clayton, when I invest are tipping points. where's a tipping point that takes you from one thing to the next? You know, the dot-com happened in 2000, and then it took another 10 years before the internet really took off. What's happening here with this currency? You're not talking about a country like Tanzania. You're talking about countries that have 3.3 billion people. You've got those 5 countries, India, China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, 3.3 billion people, 40% of the entire population of the world, and they want to move to this currency. You're getting close to 50% as a tipping point when you start adding in all the other countries like Italy and, you know, the European countries that you brought up. You hit 50% of the people that says, I'm done with the US dollar. There's your tipping point. And you better understand what's going to happen when that happens. When you're no longer the international reserve currency, you're investing, commodities become much more tough to track, and things can get expensive. Inflation in other countries goes through the roof when you don't have that status.
Well, you guys, of course, deal in silver and gold on a regular basis. This is your, but you're also a big fan of real estate, tangible assets. You and I are both on the same page with that. Like, we invest in real estate, we invest in gold, and we invest in silver. Natali and I are big believers in all 3 of those things. When you see, I mean, we see the demand right now. Silver pushing up, I think it's over 25 right now, $25. So there's increasing demand. We have, I think we had Bank of America with a price target for gold of like $2,500 an ounce. We're at like $1,900 an ounce. Oh, 3,000. Yeah, 3,000. That's right. Yeah. I was even I was saying 25. Yeah, $3,000 an ounce. So where do you see things happening right now with the supply of gold and silver and the demand for tangible assets like that?
You know, to me, right now, silver is absolutely on sale. Hard to get in big quantities. 2-3 years ago, we could get larger quantities, but since the pandemic, the silver supply has really kind of gone down. And there's a couple of reasons. To me, silver is the best double play investment, that I can find. And what I mean by that is that in a good economy, the silver being used in solar, which is just absolutely skyrocketing. We had about 5% of the silver supply being used in solar in 2015. We're up to 15%, and looks like it's going to go even higher. You have silver in water treatment plants, so solar, water treatment plants, medicine, and all the other industrial applications. So if the economy does well, and we're wrong, then silver demand should still go through the roof, and silver looks inexpensive at $25 an ounce. But if we start having these situations that we're talking about with the dollar, the economy goes into a recession, we already know silver can go to $49 or $50 an ounce, because that's exactly what it did in 2008. So to me, it's just a great investment for a portion of someone's portfolio that can play both sides of the economy at this particular point. There's just not that many investments out there like that.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I'm such a big fan of it. And that's why Natali and I just made a big purchase of silver a few weeks ago. So absolutely a big play. I know it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with these BRICS nations, how many more start coming forward here and realizing the writing's on the wall, especially after the United States blows up your pipeline. It cuts off your energy supply. They've got some rotten friends. Let's just say that the schoolyard bully is not looking so hot right now. We'll keep our eye on that. Kevin, you guys set up something special for our Redacted audience, didn't you? To be able, like, if someone wants to buy gold and silver right now, you mentioned it to me before, and I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, I love your program because it's all about education, and we want to try to help educate people with information so they can make the right decisions. So we've got a first-time investor guide that we're going to send out. We've got a report on the dollar called Canceled that's going to go through the digital situation with the Fed coin. It's going to go through the BRICS nation and what the potential things that can happen there and how to protect yourself. We've also got the silver report that will kind of go over some of the things that I was talking about. But for your program, we wanted to do something special because I love the education that you're giving. We're going to give everyone who calls or goes to the URL, learredacted.com, a $250 credit in their account. All you need to do is fill out the information or call. We're going to put $250 in your account to use for the shipping, or if you wanted to transfer an IRA, you can use it for all of those fees, and it's completely free. So
awesome.
When people call, make sure they call on the 800 number specifically for your program, or go to your URL. And we'll add the $250 automatically to everybody's account.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. That's a nice gift. We'll put that in the description below. So if anyone wants to take advantage of that and put some, put some silver, put some gold in their portfolio right now, and away from the U.S. dollar, they can do that. Kevin, great seeing you. Thank you for your insight on this, and we'll be watching what happens with the BRICS nations and the value of these precious metals over the next couple months as we head into the rest of this year. Thanks so much, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I just was seeing here in the chat while we were wrapping up, someone was saying, don't forget that the digital currency just rolled out in July. Yeah, no one's been talking about it. I'm going to work on a full video on this because I think it's so important. A couple of months ago, I was warning people that this digital currency was coming. The FedNow program was being test marketed to a number of different big banks, but all the important ones that run our government, JP Morgan, Chase, all of these guys were being tested with these transactions in this FedNow program, this digital currency. And it officially rolled out in July. But shh, don't tell anyone. It's here. It's now rolling out. And I'm working on another video for next week, another report on exactly how the Fed is going to be rolling this out and how these central banks want to get you hooked on it. And here's the secret: universal basic income. Here's the question for you. If they will give you, I'll just ask you this now. Well, actually, I'll ask you it now. And then when I do the story on Monday, so I'm going to work on it. I'm going to work on the research of it over the weekend. How many of you would, and just be totally honest, you don't have, and there's nothing to be shy about. Don't be too proud, too humble, whatever, prideful, because they've certainly devalued the U.S. dollar, right? So runaway inflation. So the question is, if they gave you $2,000 a month in universal basic income, would you submit to their digital way of doing business and digital currency? Would you have a chip planted in your hand to allow them to control everything? Gone would be your control of your own bank account. They will now control it all, but they will put $2,000 in your account every month, universal basic income. Would you do it? Would you agree to have something implanted into you? Let me know in the chat. What would you guys do? Would you guys do it?
I sure as hell wouldn't. My complicity cannot be bought.
Yeah. No.
I mean, seriously, I would try to figure out a way to disconnect from society however I could. If I had to just go to the middle of nowhere and live in the desert with Jesse Ventura, I would do it. I would figure out a way to get out of here.
Yeah, Jesse Ventura. That'd be actually a lot of fun. Yeah. Can you imagine how much fun
he would know how to survive,
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. We need more people that are just crazy in this world, right? It's the crazy ones who, I'd much rather hang around, it's like having dinner with Alex Jones. It was a great dinner, and I had a blast. And I'd rather have dinner with Alex Jones than any of these corrupt, bankers and all these people. So anyway, let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. I'm working on that story for next week. We've got a lot more news to get to here on a lot of people saying, no, never, 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 never. Mark of the beast, mark of the beast, mark of the beast. Yes.
But even the mark of the beast thing aside, who is actually advocating for this that's not the government? Are there people running around going, man, this is a great idea? I just can't imagine that.
Yeah. Wait till my report on Monday. I'm going through all the data now, and I'm just going through the reporting of it now. It's not just the government.
If you think about it, there's going to be people that are, it's going to affect poorest people the most, because people that need the hand up, that need Social Security, that need food stamps, that need all that stuff, they're going to be so desperate, and they'll be like, hey, we're going to increase the amount. They'll be like, yes, do it. And then they will be out there praising it because it'll work for them.
Yeah. Right. Oh, exactly. So you're going to pray. And by the way, why do you think they're testing all of this out in Ukraine right now? Why are they rolling out the DIA app there? Why are they using this as the ultimate test bed? Why are they rolling this out in parts of Africa right now? Right? It's the people that need the help the most is who are most compliant and who they can get under their control. We've got more news to get to here. We're going to talk about Disney in a moment. We're also going to look at what's going on in Iraq with this breaking news. And it's very interesting what's happening there, and unbelievable what these NATO countries are trying to do to provoke the Middle East once again. We'll talk about that. But first, it's a startling description. The UN food chief has warned the world with the words, knocking on famine's door. And he called what we're facing right now a perfect storm. A perfect storm. And he's not alone. Barron's just published a food shortage report that could be coming even in the United States. Farmers are seeing it too. John Boy Jr., a fourth-generation farmer, told Fox News that we're going to see empty food shelves in the coming months. That's why getting survival food is more important than ever. Natali and I have done that. My relatives have done it. We've made sure we have enough storage of food for a couple of years. Create your own stockpile of food. And our friends over at the best-selling 4 Patriots company and their survival food kits are making it super easy. You can get 10% off your first order if you use our coupon code Redacted. Even if you just get a few meals so that you can sustain through any kind of, a weather event, an outage, anything like that. They're trying to move us away and move us off of fossil fuels. But the great conundrum, of course, is that we don't have the battery capacity to survive. And we've shut off nuclear power plants. So this energy catastrophe is raging through Europe. It's going to get much, much worse this fall and into the winter, especially in Germany and other areas that have been shut off from natural gas. What's amazing about 4patriots.com, if you go there and use our coupon code Redacted, they have hand-picked family-owned meals and from their family-owned facility in the United States. They have 25 years of amazing survival food. So we're talking about food that can last for 25 years, guys. And good food. It's not ordinary food. They have breakfasts, they have lunches, they have dinners. You can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. Just add boiling water. You can simmer and you can serve. And right now, for the next few days, listeners of Redacted will get 10% off their first order at 4patriots.com by using the coupon code Redacted. Go to that's the numeral 4patriots.com and use the code Redacted to start your stockpile today. We did that. David and Philip, have you guys done that yet? Have you guys gotten just some backup food?
Actually, since we first ran that ad, I'm looking into getting that. But yeah, I'm going to be storing myself.
I mean, just having some on hand, and it's really crazy to think like what happens. We saw during COVID what these globalists are doing. I mean, they're taking away farms, for crying out loud. They're trying to take away farms and meat and protein, just to have something on hand in case these globalists get their hands on it. And rotate through it. It's like that's the thing. It's like you don't have to keep it for 25 years. Rotate through it every few months, and so you're kind of keeping a fresh supply in there every year or so. That's what we do. All right, we've got more news to get to here. I want to talk about this story. Well, investors are freaking out at Disney. And Wall Street is freaking out at Disney. Disney is not the cash cow that it once was, and it's been hemorrhaging money these last few years. It's almost like they're trying to fail on purpose. And it's like they can't, what's weird is it's almost like they can't even see it. Like we all see it. Like, what are you doing, Bud Light? What are you doing, Disney? What is wrong with you people? Do you not see what you're doing? It's like you're running with scissors. You don't do that. Here is a Wall Street Journal piece this week about Bob Iger and how he's basically captaining the Titanic. This is literally what they're calling it, or the Titan. What do they call it? The Titan.
Yeah, the Titan.
The Titan submarine. Is it a simple matter to go woke and go broke? Maybe. I don't like that saying, but I think it's too simplistic. But I do think it's a phenomenon right now that economists are going to have to look into, and they're going to study this period in schools and colleges from years from now. They're going to look at this. Do pedantic companies turn people off? Do they offend you? Trying to talk down to you or preach to you? Are you turned off by that? I absolutely grow tired of all the moralizing in Disney products, but is that a measurable economic sentiment? That's a real question, right? Is that a measurable economic sentiment? Look at the box office records for Disney's last 9 movies. A YouTuber called Valiant Renegade has done an analysis of the following movies. His specialty is taking these movies, analyzing the business as Hollywood, and he's great. He looks at the box office numbers from the following movies: Lightyear from Pixar, the Buzz Lightyear movie, Thor: Love and Thunder, Strange World, Black Panther, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Little Mermaid, and Elemental. And he does not include Indiana Jones and the Dial of Doom or Dial of Destiny, which was so bad that my children begged me to leave, which is so sad. Think about this. Indiana Jones going to the theater, see Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, Last Crusade. Like, those movies were amazing.
They're still amazing. I go back and watch them still. They still hold up.
Raiders of the Lost Ark is arguably one of the greatest action adventure movies of all time. If you look, it's a 4-star movie, or if you use a 5 out of 5, it's a 5 out of 5-star movie. It's a classic movie based on the original serials that people would see in the theaters, those short, like 15-minute serials, those action serials that always had a cliffhanger. They were amazing. It was amazing. And now they're just awful. Absolutely awful. So watch the numbers here as he explains this. Watch what he says about the dwindling profits of Disney feature films.
Last couple of years, we've seen those numbers dwindle to next to nothing. That's mostly because of two major problems at the Walt Disney Company. Number one, the films they're putting out just aren't reaching the same audiences that they used to, even while other studios like Universal and Paramount are still generating massive, legitimate blockbusters. Disney continues to miss the mark from every studio that they have, and they're not even done yet for this year because Lucasfilm is on the table up next with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And as of right now, that's going to be ringing up yet another loss for the Walt Disney Company unless something radical changes. But where are we to this point? Let's take a look at a chart. What you see here is a chronological timetable beginning with Lightyear in June of last year and running through Elemental, June of this year, 2023. Production budgets are laid out, and we have used the stipulated budgets listed on places like the numbers. We haven't adjusted any of these budgets for information that we've previously reported on with production overruns, massive reshoots on certain things. We're going to leave all that out of the equation for right now and just go with the information that is publicly available. And if we go from north to south in the first column, you can see the production budgets tally up to a whopping $1.735 billion. Global prints and ads, that's the global marketing spend. Again, the tally there, about another $1 billion.
So then he puts these calculations in here, and someone in the chat just said, hey, you're not 5 years old. Don't go see movies. Grow up. What? I love movies. I'm never going to grow up.
What a sad sentiment. What? Really?
Don't go to movies. Grow up.
Stop entertaining yourself, Clayton.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go sit and stare at a waterfall for the rest of my life.
Wait till I find out you play games, too.
Yeah. Guitar and oh my God, don't do any of that. Anyway, he takes into account the rental market by location. Take a look at this. So this is the rental market by location. And wow, pretty awful. I mean, just awful. So let's get into his final calculations of these films. Listen.
Now, if you've already picked up on the fact that there's a big problem here, congratulations, you're right. Remember on the first slide, how much money did the Walt Disney Company spend starting with Lightyear and going all the way through Elemental now? Those 8 films. How much did the Walt Disney Company spend to produce and market these films into theaters? $2.75 billion was the total WDC total investment. Again, you can see down there, this is Lightyear, Thor Love and Thunder, Strange World, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, The Little Mermaid, and Elemental. So if Disney spent $2.75 billion to make all those films, how much did they actually get back in rentals from theaters? $1.86 billion. That was the total theatrical rental income, again, for those same 8 films. And I want to stipulate, you'll see down there, The Little Mermaid and Elemental are estimated. Of course, they have not yet completed their runs, but I think my estimates on them are very fair. Again, go back and look at the slide. You can pause it on there and look down the entire list for yourself as long as you like. So I'm not a math whiz or anything, but it seems like there would be a loss there. Yeah, that would be about an $890 million loss. With a $2.75 billion spend and a $1.86 billion intake, that's what we're left with, about $890 million in losses on these last 8 films in the aggregate.
So you have Sound of Freedom, #1 at the box office, right? You have Jason Aldean with a #1 country song because, being censored. It's like maybe these companies should pay attention to what's actually happening out there right now. So is Disney maybe going to self-reflect and ask themselves why people don't like their movies anymore? Here's the main reason and lesson that they could learn. Avoid movies that are this: pedantic, annoying others with your own valued rules and life lessons in an ostentatious and trivial manner. No one wants to be lectured about how to live when they are watching movies. That's the reason you go to a movie, right? But
yeah, commenter.
Exactly. But that is what we get. We will get if we go see Snow White, apparently. So Snow White, of course, not only have they taken the German fairy tale with a protagonist that is supposed to have white skin, literally, that's what the Germanic character is based on, the fairy tale. Skin as white as snow. In the fairy tale, lips that are rosy red. I think it's like, if I'm remembering, it's like hair as black as ebony, skin as white as snow, Snow White.
Well, and did you?
I mean, isn't there a whole thing like who's the
Morgan?
Go ahead, Philip. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say the whole who's the fairest of them all. Like that's part of the story. Like that's
mirror on the wall.
Mirror on the wall part.
Exactly. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you see the interview with Piers Morgan and the dwarf? I can't remember the guy's name, but like he was arguing with a guy that's like they shouldn't be dwarves because that's condescending. He's like, so you're saying it's kind of like condescending. You're taking like one of the roles that like it's hard for dwarves to get roles, period, right? And to take roles like Oompa Loompas and stuff like that away from them because you feel like it's bad to have dwarves in there for whatever reason. Like why? You know, there was no reason. And this dwarf was arguing with this guy that was saying that it was wrong. And it's just like, you know, so
Peter Dinklage?
Even that they're woke because
Yeah.
they're all like, you know, diverse people, and it's insane.
It's insanity. And so now, not only do they have, this Germanic fairy tale with a protagonist that's supposed to have white skin as a key attribute, and they cast her as a Latina. So now the Snow White will be Latina. They also
Brown
have...
instead of Snow White.
Exactly. They also have taken the mythical dwarves. These are mythical dwarves. Like if you've read any fantasy novels, you've read Lord of the Rings, you've read R.A. Salvatore books, anything like that. Dwarves are not people human beings with dwarfism. These are mythical dwarves. They have nothing to do with human beings that have dwarfism. It's not even the same. Just like ogres are not a certain type of human. Well, maybe we could think that, but you know what I'm saying? These totally, or orcs. Orcs are not some sort of a human being. It's a mythical, fantastical character. Anyway, now they've cast the mythical dwarves as people with, people of various heights, races, and genders. Look at this. I mean,
oh yeah, I can tell that one's non-binary. You can see it.
I mean, look at this picture. This looks like something out of like a Renaissance fair, doesn't it? Like a bad Renaissance fair. Like if you went to here we are in Pennsylvania for the weekend, we're going to go get a funnel cake and go to the Renaissance fair. And who are you guys supposed to be?
Team.
We're the seven dwarves. No, you're not. Maybe the guy in the front is, but what are you guys? 7 dwarves. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, we're the 1 dwarf and 6 idiots. What are you saying?
Are you serious? You really couldn't find anyone? I mean, give me a break. And they warned us that they were going to take a different approach with this film to the dwarves after the Game of Thrones actor Peter Dinklage called the Disney movie company, quote, effing backwards for planning to cast dwarfs. So a different approach means not employing human beings that have dwarfism who might actually have loved that job. It's like, as David was just saying, it's hard enough to get that job. How many available openings are there in Hollywood for a job that requires a small person? And now we need to give it to a tall person? It's the 7 dwarves. Why don't you hire Shaquille O'Neal, for crying out loud? He hasn't been doing anything for a while. And since we don't care about the height part of it, put Shaquille O'Neal in there, for crying out loud.
He was great in Steel.
He was great in Steel. Get Pamela Anderson. She's not doing anything right now. She's not a dwarf. She was great in Barbed Wire. Use her in this. But now think about all of the unemployed dwarf actors out there who would actually like to. I mean, if you're a human being with dwarfism and you're growing up, you're thinking, hey, if I could ever play like in a live action Snow White film as one of the 7 dwarfs, like that would be probably the role of a lifetime if I'm an actor and Disney came calling. Would I be offended that they chose a short person for this role? No, I have dwarfism. I'd like to play that role. But now they can't even get that job because of woke politics.
And what are they arguing? What is the point they're arguing? Like, we want to be diverse. We don't want to, like, there's something wrong with dwarves. Like, what is wrong with little people? You know what I mean? It just makes it seem like there's something wrong with them, so we can't cast them because it's not woke, it's not diverse. Like, it just makes no sense.
Well, I mean, in Game of Thrones, Peter Dinklage plays, he literally plays a dwarf. That's the character in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, could you imagine they're like, okay, this is a dwarf, but they give it to another character, and then it's like, okay, so, but you're a dwarf, but you're not small. So, you know what I mean? It's like...
Yeah, you're going to pretend you're a dwarf, so you're going to act small. So, we're going to give this job to Idris Elba. Because, well...
And that was another thing that this person was pissed off about on Piers Morgan, because they gave the Oompa Loompa role in the new Willy Wonka to what's the English actor?
Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant. They gave it to him, and he's like CGI'd into a little person when they could have given that to somebody too, even Peter Dinklage.
And then you just posted in our redacted chat here, said Dylan Postal, who's
that's the guy.
Oh, he's upset that, okay, he's the one that wants, I thought he was, so he wants it to be? Anyway, these roles are made for, okay, so he wants to be a dwarf in this film?
He is a dwarf.
Oh, okay. No, but I'm saying, I'm sorry, I'm confused here. Never mind. So he was complaining about it. That's the guy that was complaining that they were going to use small people, little people in the movie, and he was happy.
He's complaining that they didn't.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Okay, yeah, he's complaining that they didn't. Okay, gotcha. Good. Anyway, they warned us that they were going to take a different approach to this dwarfs thing after Peter Dinklage did this. And I mean, they would have loved this job. And here, have you ever seen the show Life's Too Short with Warwick Davis? It was hilarious. It was a Ricky Gervais. It was a Ricky Gervais show. It's a great show. It's literally about how hard it is for him to get a job in Hollywood, even though he was in Star Wars. He was in Harry Potter. He was in Willow. The whole show is about how difficult it is for him as a little person to get a job in Hollywood because there's not enough dwarf jobs in Hollywood. And here you take away the 7 dwarfs from I mean, this is just amazing what's happening. Oh my God. And by the way, Willow was such a huge flop for Disney that they pulled it from Disney Plus, the new Willow TV show. I'm sure he would love to have been offered. I didn't even watch it. I mean, I watched the movie in the 1980s, but
yeah, it was the only show I've hate watched. I've never done that. Usually if I don't like a show, like I'll stop watching it, but it's like every episode I'm like, this can't possibly get worse. And then it would. And it was just like watching Disney urinate on my childhood is basically what that TV show was like. It was
Someone in the chats just said, way to cover the most important story of the day, LOL. Hey, we've covered our Constitution. We covered censorship. We're covering we covered the Ukraine war. We're going to be covering Iraq. We're covering one of the biggest companies in the world who's gone through woke cultural politics and literally destroying its company by doing this kind of bullshit right now. This is about our culture. Like, this is about our culture. And this is exactly what corporate America is doing. And it's just look at Bud Light, right? This is absolutely destroying these companies. I think he would have loved to have played the role of Doc, right? Warwick Davis. He would have loved to play Doc in the 7 Dwarfs. Not only this dwarf business, they've also written the prince out of the script. So the prince isn't even in the script anymore for Snow White. So he can't kiss her and bring her back. Here's how the lead actress, Rachel Zegler, and Gal Gadot, who's playing the evil queen, were talking about how we don't need a prince anymore. It's 2023. We don't need a prince. We don't need any of that. This is a totally different Snow White. Watch.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
Snow White is running for president.
I'm launching my campaign. I am.
So Disney is like in a tailspin because at first they came out and they said that those images of the dwarfs weren't real. And then they walked it back and they said, yeah, that actually is from the film. And so they're on this sort of like total damage control right now. I think, Natali, you and I were talking about this earlier today. She said, some fairy tales have to exist as cultural relics. They're there 100 years ago, right? Or longer. As a middle-aged woman, as Natali was telling me, my wife is, I'm 46, so she's 44. She says she doesn't love the idea of a woman who is evil and bad just because she's aging and then insanely jealous of the younger Snow White and youth and beauty, and that's the story. Either you tell the story the way it was as a cultural relic, or you don't tell it at all, and you don't remake it into some weird, modern, woke fantasy. And so in order to keep making these crappy, pedantic movies, Disney may have to sell off other parts of their company. So they held an off-site meeting yesterday. Disney held this like emergency meeting yesterday. And Bob Iger hinted at maybe selling ABC, selling off some of their streaming properties like Disney Plus, which is losing a ton of money and millions of subscribers right now. So there was a big freak out about this. They're bleeding subscribers. Disney said that Disney Plus would be profitable by the fall of 2024, and they're closing in on that mark, and it's not, and it doesn't look like it's going to be profitable. So the biggest question is right now is will Disney learn from this and make some changes? Will they stop pretending the strong female characters are a brand new concept? Will they recast Snow White or go ahead with this pedantic lesson in diversity that nobody asked for at all? And if past is prologue, they're going to go ahead with the Snow White cast and more park princesses like this. This is trans Aurora. So this is a transgender princess at one of the Disney parks. This is 2023. This is what's going on. And just as to put a pin in this, like the Indiana Jones movie, one of the reasons it was just so god awful is here you have this iconic character, Indiana Jones, who is portrayed as a bumbling fool in this movie and can't do anything right unless the woman swoops in to help him, right? Or give him the correct answer. And even when he then finally figures one little thing out in the movie, she has to step in and take credit for it. You can't give us our iconic male character anymore. He can't be a strong male character. And there's a total difference between that movie and then the new Mission Impossible movie. Is it wrong to have a strong male lead? And then you have a woman who's like, you know what? I couldn't open this door. I just didn't have the strength that you had as a lifelong agent in the Impossible Mission Force to come open this gate or this thing that was connected to the train. Help me out here. And Tom Cruise swoops in and he saves the lady. Is that so bad? But now
it's promising,
Disney's
though.
writing it all out.
This just shows you that they're catering to a small minority that can't maintain their profits. They're not going to stay in business if they try to cater to this small crowd. It's the movies that are catering to the majority, the Top Guns, the Sound of Freedom. These movies that are just they just make movies. They're not trying to be diverse for diverse sake. They're not doing all this woke agenda stuff. They're just making movies. Yeah. And those are the ones that are succeeding. So it's promising to see that those are not going to succeed. So I think it'll continue to fall off.
You have Maverick, which was excellent, right? Huge success at the box office. You have the new Mission Impossible movie was excellent. And I came out of the movie and my kids, we were like, that's how you make a movie. It's amazing. Literally some similar tropes from Indiana Jones, like train scenes, things like that. And you literally did the polar opposite. You have a giant turd of a movie in Indiana Jones and how sadly that movie has fallen. And then you have this new Mission Impossible movie, which was excellent. And you could eat 2 boxes of popcorn with that one. That was a pure thrill ride. Absolutely fantastic.
Well, you know what's sad too is Harrison Ford is such an icon, and to send an icon off into history with that on his record, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like a smack in the face to his legacy in a way.
You know, my son loves, because I love those movies, and my son plays piano, right? And so do all my kids, but he's the oldest, and so he plays a lot of it, regularly, and he loves John Williams scores, right? So he's playing the theme from Indiana Jones and plays the John Williams score, dun, 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 dun. He plays the full theme and everything, and he was playing it all in the lead up to it. We couldn't wait to go see the movie. And then when we got back, like, he just stopped playing the song. Isn't that sad? Like, the movie was so bad. Sad. He's just like, I don't really even want to play that song right now because I just don't feel like.
And they killed Han Solo. I mean, like, look what the Harrison Ford. Come on, man.
Yeah, awful. There's your Thursday night movie break. But this is what happens. Go woke, go broke. And that's what that's what's happening to Disney right now. See if they can do a full reversal. I would love to see them do a full reversal. Go back to these great movies of our childhood and, all of that. Anyway, we got more news to get to here. We're going to talk about this breaking news out of Iraq and what's going on with Sweden trying to burn the Quran, and trying to incite violence. Are we trying to stir up the Middle East once again? We've got a special guest, from Lebanon, from Beirut. He's going to be joining us to talk about that. But first, anyone can find anything on the internet, including your full legal name, all of your stuff, all of your home address, all of that stuff, right? If you do a search, you can find out, just do a search for yourself and look what personal information you can find about yourself on the internet. It's absolutely frightening. And this information is accessible because of these data brokers who profit by selling your information to robocallers, telemarketers, spammers, anyone else that wants to learn more about you. I was on the phone with a friend the other day. I don't ever talk on the phone. In the middle of our phone call, he got 2 phone calls from telemarketers. This is because they know they can get you, and they're getting this information from these data brokers. That's why I'm excited to tell you about our today's sponsor, Aura. Aura will identify data brokers that are exposing your information and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf. They'll even opt you out of junk mail and telemarketing lists. And you can use our link, aura.com/redacted, or use that QR code right on your screen right there. And you can try it for 2 weeks. And in that 2 weeks, you're going to see how many data brokers are sharing your information. It's unbelievable. It really is. You can use the link in our description, or just go to aura.com/redacted. Try it for 2 weeks for free and just see. In that 2 weeks, you're going to be blown away. It's amazing. I mean, we had our Facebook account hacked, stolen from us. It wound up in the hands of some Vietnamese people. It was really bizarre. It was in Vietnam that they had taken over the account. We were able to get it back and everything, but it was crazy. Also, the app features a VPN, a password manager, real-time credit and identity theft monitoring, internet parental controls, and it protects your devices from malware. Aura has almost every internet safety tool you'll ever need, all inside of one application. Let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe online. If you sign up right now, we'll give you a 2-week free trial with my link. You'll be shocked at how much of your private information Aura finds exposed over those 2 weeks. Go to aura.com/redacted. Again, to start your free trial, aura.com/redacted. Well, breaking news out of Iraq, where the Iraqi government has expelled the Swedish ambassador from Baghdad. This comes in response to the burning of the Quran during 2 scheduled events in Stockholm, Sweden. Protesters swarmed the Swedish embassy in Iraq overnight. We understand that they waited to make sure there were no people inside the building before they did so. They set it on fire. The Swedish government announced it was going to allow people to get together and set fire to the Quran in Stockholm, Sweden. And it sounds like it was even promoted inside the police in Stockholm. Joining us to understand this more deeply is Marwa Osman, an assistant professor of media studies at Lebanese University in Beirut. Marwa, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, Sweden permitted the burning of 2 Qurans, one outside the Turkish embassy and the other outside a mosque during prayers. They cited freedom of speech, and yet the government of Sweden bans hate speech, essentially, for anyone who's critical of the transgender agenda. Speaking out against that is considered hate speech. Seems like a contradiction in terms here inside of Sweden. What's going on? What do you make of this?
Well, let me begin by saying, imagine with me if instead of the Holy Quran, it was the flag of what the West calls the pride flag, the flag of the LGBTQ, whatever letters remain, that was burnt, the rainbow flag, it was burnt. And imagine with me what the Western world would have response and retaliated and called all sorts of names. And, you know, they are used to bringing out new terminology to stick to the people who don't condone whatever agenda or whatever Western values they want to impose against societies. So just imagine that instead of the Holy Quran, and you can just visualize with me the headlines that would come out from the mainstream media and the media that actually supports such issues learning the Quran and regarding it as a freedom of speech. It's not a freedom of speech, because if we're so, it would equally mean that burning the Bible and burning the Talmud or the holy Christian and Jewish books would have equally happened, and we wouldn't have heard a peep out of anyone. But that would never happen, especially in the West, because in the West it's a minority of Muslims versus a majority of Christians and Jews. But that's not the issue. It's not about burning people's belief system of 1.3 billion humans on the planet. It's about the hypocrisy that comes with it. It's not just about burning a holy book that means in the entire life for people like me, for example, versus being so much critical and using some sort of a mental maneuver to tell the public, to portray to the public, especially in the West, that it is okay to do this, but it's not okay to touch issues like transgender or LGBTQ or whatever the new Western values that want to take over the conservative values of communities all over the world is. Right here where I live, where the communities are very much attached to their religious beliefs, where the Holy Quran is something that they build their life around. The teachings of the Holy Quran are very specific in their daily detailed routine life. They found that this is beyond triggering, beyond disrespectful. It comes to a point where it's a war. It's an ignition of a war. When you go in front of a mosque and you burn the most sacred thing that this mosque basically was built around, you are declaring war against these groups of people. The same thing would happen if you go in front of a church and burn the Holy Bible on a Sunday morning when this is giving a preach. The same thing would happen if it's on a Shabbat in front of a synagogue. But the West don't see that when it comes to Muslims. And they have never seen that since after World War II, when any campaign would get immediate backing and support when it has to do with bombing or creating coup d'etats or annihilating groups of people who are supposedly Muslims in the East. So to get to a point where you can burn the Quran and call it a freedom of speech, you went through at least 40 years of oppression and of a bombardment campaign of dehumanizing the people who support this Quran to begin with, so that the West, when this happens, the Western communities will look at it and say, well, the people who support such a book, barbarians to begin with, are people who get bombed because they are terrorists to begin with. So it's a mental model. It has happened over more than 4 decades, 3 decades to be exact, but 4 decades, starting with areas as far as the Central and whatnot, with the war with the Soviet Union at that time, moving into what the West calls the Middle East, which is Western Asia. In order to allow such a thought to take such a very little time for the Western people to think about, to maybe retaliate, maybe to start some sit-ins or protests, or at least seminars to discuss it. They didn't even do that, because in the back of their mind, they already know that it's okay to do that because the people who support this book are terrorists to begin with. So it is not about that single act. That single act, yes, it triggers communities around the world, especially in the Muslim and Arab world. But we do understand that the lack of sympathy, empathy, and anger, the lack of anger towards such actions by Western communities comes from these 3 to 4 decades of dehumanizing the people who supports the Quran.
Very well said. Seems like this is part of a NATO playbook. Sweden is now, of course, a member of a NATO country, and it seems like there's a lack of awareness about NATO's past and destabilizing these countries, destroying these countries. And then, of course, these people who want to live in their own countries, they want to live in Syria, they want to live in Lebanon, they want to live in Libya. But because you've destroyed their own countries, they come to your country, and then you hold book-burning seminars and things that are sanctioned by the Stockholm police in front of mosques because you're upset about it. It's a total lack of awareness, I think, about the history and the implications of NATO's actions here. Am I wrong about this?
You're absolutely right, because I've been to seminars to talk about geopolitics, especially in West Asia, all across Europe, except for Germany and Spain. I've never been to Germany or Spain, but all across Europe and the UK. And I've spoken to a lot of people who wanted to know more. And my shock was they did not know that their countries were involved in campaigns against people more than 3,000 or 4,000 miles away, who are being killed by the tax money that these people who have no knowledge of what happened are paying. They had no idea, and this is because of the media censorship, the media blackout. We all know about this. We've been aware about this, especially lately in the past couple of years. But they had really no idea. And when I speak about the horrors, when I show them videos and pictures that are right there on YouTube and on Google, but it's not found in your search engines because it's either very hard to find or you don't know what kind of terminology you need to use to find these events. These events, people are shocked. And I do believe in the goodness of heart of people wherever they are. I don't have a problem with anyone as long as they hear me out and hear my story and the story of my people and other people who were killed, incarcerated, bombarded, stripped of their lives, and youth in countries like mine. When they listen to that, they say, well, we are sorry, but we didn't know. So I'm not blaming entire community for this, but where the blame for me is strictly about not going out and searching for the truth yourself. The first thing that I teach my students in university is, look, don't trust me. Don't listen to me. Go do your own research. Critical thinking starts by you finding your own thoughts by looking into matters on your own hands. This is what the West doesn't do. I think that people have come to a point that they are really very much dependent on what the government or what mainstream media institutions or mainstream institutions in general. It doesn't have to be media. It can be an education facility, an academic facility, it can be a university pushing thoughts that people take for granted and don't look up for something to negate it or to give up more theories to think about. They just take that information, grab it, and depict it as the truth. And that's the main problem that we as Easterners face with Westerners at the moment, without even getting into what's going on between Ukraine and Russia and the massive amount of misinformation that's being spread. I'm talking about my region, my Lebanon, for example. I don't want to talk about Syria or Iraq. Lebanon. People had no idea that in 2006, 1,500 humans died, including 500 children, because of a bombardment campaign that the NATO was part of, that the US was part of, only Israel. They had no idea. They don't know about these issues. So it is my job when I get invited to such seminars to talk about it, but it is a shock for me that they don't look beyond what the media presents to them right on their border, sometimes right in their neighborhood. They don't want to know what's going on in other neighborhoods. And that's shocking for me.
It really is. It really is troubling. And there's a lack of awareness, I think, about what's happening around the world. And it's meant that way when the U.S. media keeps it hidden that way. The story is not making headlines really anywhere. That's why we wanted to give voice to this story. The U.S. has come out and condemned this. Russia has condemned this burning of the Quran in Sweden, although the United States says, well, but yeah, it's bad, but it falls under free expression. It falls under the aegis of free expression. But it's okay in the United States to be arrested if you wear a Let's Go Brandon t-shirt or a MAGA hat. You'll be rounded up and persecuted for that. But it's under free expression. In Canada, I want to get your thoughts on this, because it seems like this awareness now that I guess Muslims can't think for themselves. Justin Trudeau's government, in a very condescending move, is basically saying that because Muslims in Canada do not want the government foisting gender ideology onto their children, that they are being influenced by the far right, that the far right extremists are now trying to invade the minds of the Muslim populations in both the United States and in Canada, that you can't think for yourself.
Have they read the Quran? Do they know what our belief system is about? Have they not read the verses that strictly bans any sexuality in Islam? I'm sorry. Look, I understand as a woman in this day and age, and I know about cultures in East and West, and I do respect people's choices. I cannot in any way, shape, or form tell people not to do whatever they want to do. But at the same time, I expect, no, I demand from them to respect my views, my regulations for myself and for my family unit, which is the teachings of Islam, which is basically an interpretation verse by verse of the Holy Quran. And it's just not Quran on its own. It's the Bible, it's the Talmud, it's it's all three religious it is the religions that have the notion of a one God: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. All three books specifically and in a very clear manner explains how these teachings are against homosexuality. They are not against transgender people, because at least as a Muslim woman, I speak from the teachings of Islam. If according to medical reports, a woman or a man tends to be more, if a man an XXY chromosome, which means he is built physically as a woman, then Islam actually allows that man to just transition into a woman without flaunting it, because we're not allowed to flaunt anything in Islam. I'm not allowed to show you my hair or my body because this is what Islam tells me. Yes, it's a challenge. It's an everyday challenge for me, but this is what I believe in. The same thing for people who transition, but the West has taken that and made it into some sort of a cult that attacks anyone who merely just criticizes it. And what Canada is doing is, I'll be very honest with you, I know at least 5 families right here in the area where I live down South Lebanon that have returned from Canada. 2 families about 30 kilometers from where I live have returned from California because they have been threatened to have their family disbanded and their children removed because they are teaching the Islamic teachings. They are not teaching them to hate anyone. On the contrary, Islam says no one takes what another human being holds as a burden. His burden is his burden, yours is yours. Live and let live, but live within what the teachings of Islam tell you. You want to strip me of my right to have my Islamic teachings flowing into my family tradition? I'm sorry, what you're doing is not only disrespectful, it's illegal. What about all the UN conventions and the international law that guarantees me practicing my religion this way that I see fit, as it has been for the past 1,500 years? Where are those laws? Canada is just surpassing these laws, ignoring these laws, and just creating some sort of a set of new values and imposing them, basically just pushing them down the throats of everyone else without even having at least a referendum. Ask the people whether they want it or not. Why are they afraid of that?
Great points, all excellent points. Canada following that line, and the United Nations allowing themselves to pick and choose which charters, which rules, which resolutions that they can adhere to, and ignore the rights and rules of laws of other countries on a regular basis. This is what the United Nations does on a regular basis. Marwa, thank you so much for this, and thank you for this insight. It's really fascinating to see what's happening inside of Baghdad right now, what's happening inside of Sweden, a NATO country trying to provoke this unrest. You have to wonder if something else is going on here. And I don't want to speculate, but I think we could probably draw some conclusions. Marwa, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, it was so great having her on the show. And, I just got to say thank you so much for subscribing to this show and supporting what we do here, because, we're able to have on guests that you're not going to see in the mainstream media. You're not going to see on CNN or frankly, Fox or MSNBC or any place like that. So we can give voice to people who have a very interesting perspective, who are highly educated, deeply knowledgeable about these topics. So, when you subscribe, you're really supporting independent journalism. You're supporting these voices that need a platform to be able to share, because you're only getting one version of the story right now through the corrupt mainstream media. So, we are not funded by the mainstream media or the big billionaires that fund all of these corporations. We are supported by you. So thank you guys so much for supporting us. Again, I should mention, we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. It's a way that you can support our show, but it's free. So all you need to do is just sign up, go to redacted.inc, put in your email address, and then you will receive a welcome email from me. It might go to your spam folder, might go, I don't know, your junk folder, whatever. Google has labeled us as dangerous. Gmail has labeled us as dangerous, which I love. So it might wind up in your spam or some other folder. Just drag it over to your inbox. And then Monday through Thursday during the summer, we publish the newsletter. So there won't be a newsletter tomorrow morning, but we'll have it back on Monday with our normal newsletter schedule. And then over the weekend, we occasionally publish some really good financial newsletter updates as well. So anyway, it's totally free. It's a lot of fun. You can read in about 5 or 10 minutes over your cup of coffee. Just go to redacted.inc and sign up. It's our way to stay connected with you. And yeah, that's all you can do. And it's, hey, it's totally free to be a subscriber, a follower of our show here. So anyway, much love to all of you. Sorry, Natali couldn't be here tonight. She had the night off, but she'll be back on Monday. We'll have the full team back together on Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Have a great weekend, everyone. Much love to all of you. And we'll see you back here on Monday. Bye, everyone.